What up peeps, and welcome back to a new review video. So we finally got to see the long anticipated Batman movie, which was originally supposed to be Ben Affleck's trilogy version, as he was writing, producing and directing it for the DCEU, of course. And I think the announcement for it came right before or around the time of release for the Justice League, and he was called the Batman from then on. And obviously all of that was before all that shit spiraled down for the whole project, leading eventually to Ben Affleck stepping down from it. And I still really want to see his version come out in the big screen, because he is such a fantastic writer and director, as we have seen before from some of his earlier work like The Town and Argo. But nevertheless, the project then continued when Matt Reeves was brought on board, and a new take, cast and vision were then planned and visualized to eventually give us this, I would call it masterpiece, but not the best Batman movie out there. And speaking of Matt Reeves, when it was announced that he was going to be in the director's wheel of this, I knew that it was going to be an impressive work, because he's no stranger to some great cinematic work from before. I mean, he gave us Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, War for the Planet of the Apes, Cloverfield, which was an amazing story, and it inspired 2 more continuations to that story or to the movie. So I was on board to see his new vision for this one. So before we jump into it, a reminder as well that this is going to be a spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, you know what to expect. First things first, this movie is a whole other level of realistic, dark, gritty, dramatic, noir and psychological thriller comic movie. Here's the thing though, I don't think it can be compared to Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight. There are some elements, however, that can be individually compared to The Dark Knight, but not the whole movie together, because it's a completely different take with a different tone, focusing on a specific side of Batman, mainly his detective work, and it's delving more into the mystery solving, exposing truths, the concept of right and wrong, and resolving deep down complex crimes to expose the big picture. So it focused more on that than the crime fighting side of Batman. And as I expected, it drew more from stories like The Long Halloween and Hush, and the earlier comics about his beginnings as a crime fighter, especially in the looks of his suit and the Batmobile. From the beginning we see the presentation of Batman and Gotham, and it was outstanding on every level. The setup to the story was very straightforward, dark, and almost gives you the shiver, as we see how the vibe of Gotham is shown, and it's infested with crime and corruption, and Batman is already known to the public there, especially to the criminals and the police force. So much so that when his sign is flashed out in the sky, the criminals are trembling with fear already, and they start looking into the shadows expecting him to pop out of anywhere, and so they scram away eventually. And so we see that Batman is already using the shadows to his advantage and his method of intimidation, and it works, and this is what I loved about it. For the music, as much as it was strong and adrenaline pumping for the most part, there were some parts, however, that it was giving heavy horror vibes. There was one scene in particular where I felt like I was watching a James Wan Insidious type of movie. You know, I felt that they went a little bit too much with the music, not much that it would take from the fun of the movie, but it just felt a little bit off from the vibe or from the theme of a comic movie. But in general, it was quite strong and dramatic and would keep you on the edge of your seat throughout the stronger scenes. Also, the effects were very great all throughout the movie, especially the practical ones, but even the CGI was very convincing, and it captured the strong, intense action moments in them. One of the best parts was the introduction of the Batmobile, and what an introduction that was. My favorite scene in the whole movie was also in the trailer, when the Batmobile jumped out of the fire and slammed into the Penguin's car from behind and sent it flying. And then you see when the Batmobile is drifting with the camera mounted in the back of it, and the moment it stopped at the perfect shot that showed the Penguin's car coming down, landing, and then flipping over. Hands down, that was one of the best shots that I have ever seen in a movie, and I just want to see the making of that shot in particular. Just that one shot, I just want to see how they made it. Now for the cast, there are 3 characters that I loved who they casted for, and I loved the performances that they have given in them. Jeffrey Wright as Lieutenant Gordon, Colin Farrell as the Penguin, whom you could not even tell it was him with all that makeup. I knew it was Colin Farrell when I was watching the movie, and I still could not recognize it was him. And the third one obviously was Paul Dano as the Riddler. He was phenomenal. I saw Paul's performance in There Will Be Blood with Daniel Day-Lewis, and I was convinced. When they announced him to be the Riddler in this one, I was immediately sold and on board, and I knew that he was going to give his best performance here. As for the other actors, Zoe Kravitz was okay for her performance as Catwoman, and she did have a good relationship dynamic between her and Robert Pattinson. Her dialogues, events, and the strong scenes that she was in were good, and her performance was great in there for the most part. Apart from one line actually that it caught me off guard god, and it just stuck with me. The line when she was talking to Batman and she was like, let's get these white privileged men. That line was clearly off, and it just didn't fit in with the conversation or with the dialogue, and it was kind of clear that it was forced in there for some reason. And yeah, that was the only thing that I didn't like about it. But all in all, she was good. Then coming to Robert Pattinson, and referring back to what I said earlier about this not being the best Batman movie, here's the thing. He was not a convincing Batman for me. He did not have that strong and intimidating presence like the other actors or the previous actors had with the character. With all the presentation and the hype that he had for this movie and the introduction, or his introduction, and especially when he revealed himself, I could easily imagine Ben Affleck being in that position because he fits that role perfectly. And Robert is a great actor, of course, but he just didn't fit in this one, as I said. And the other thing that I didn't like was his hairstyle. That emo hairstyle gave me all kinds of vibes of Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 3. When he had the symbiote latching onto him and made him act all weird and shit around people, I could easily imagine Robert Pattinson doing that dance in front of people in the funeral scene or in any other scene around Gotham. There were a few things as well that got me wondering or questioning at some points. For example, the Batman suit, which was bulletproof, but it's still light enough for him to move around. And this is one of those elements that I mentioned earlier that you can compare individually between this one and The Dark Knight. See, in the beginning of The Dark Knight, when Batman captures the Scarecrow and the rest of the criminals and his impersonators, and then goes back, and I think he talks to Lucius, and he mentions to him that he needs a lighter suit, and Lucius tells him that in order to get a lighter suit, you have to get rid of some things. You know, you're going to be more exposed. So this light suit is going to protect you against knife stabs, but it might not be protective against bullets. So for this one, the fact that he could withstand that many bullets, that means that suit has to be heavy, you know. But at the same time, we could see him running freely, and he could do all of these stunts and fights very fast and easy as well. So this is one of the things that got me questioning a little bit, but still didn't take me off from enjoying the movie. So this movie has a PG-13 rating, and when I think of it, The Dark Knight had a PG-13 as well, and it pushed the limits of what it can do within that rating. But this movie, I think, bent those limits even further. That's why I think it's very intelligent, and it's obviously the darkest and most serious comic movie that we have seen, or at least I have seen it so far. It felt more like a Joker movie, especially with the build-up of the villain who's trying to achieve chaotic justice, or in this case vengeance, and has followers who commit to and achieve or execute his orders. That's why I feel this movie could tie in nicely with Joker, especially since it was set in older times, as we see Gotham City with a more dark and gritty tone similar to that of Joker movie. All in all, the cinematography, the action, the drama, the dialogue, the music and soundtracks, and the whole feel of the movie was fantastically done. That's why I called it a masterpiece. But even a masterpiece doesn't mean it's perfect, and the main thing that I felt off with was Robert Pattinson as the Batman. I was not convinced with him. The movie obviously wasn't a simple superhero movie. It was more of a crime drama, similar to Seven, The Departed, and movies with similar themes like that. So I would give this one 7.5 out of 10. Everything that was done on it, with all the performances of the actors, with the cinematography, with the shots, with the tone, with the dialogue, with everyone who worked in this film, did fantastically for it. And it's definitely worth watching on the big screen. And so let me guys know, what did you think about this one, and how much would you rate it for yourself? And if there are any more points that you want to add into this review, or any more ideas that you want to include into this discussion, please drop them all in the comments below. I would very much love to read what you guys have to say about this one. And until I see you guys in the next video, thank you very much for watching. Have a splendid day, and peace out.